Former flat earthers, what made you come round? I talked to a flat earther about my job working for a company that tracks ship locations, routes, and speeds by satellite. We also had ways of monitoring carbon emissions based on fuel consumption and known weather conditions. None of this would work at all if the Earth was flat. Not a jot of it. I could only explain the most basic concepts, but it was enough for him to understand and realize that I was right and that I'd been convinced by someone who had no practical experience of the spherical nature of the Earth. I think that's what really did it. My experience was really tangible. This happens, then we measure this, etc., etc. No theory, just practice. A bit like showing a child a rock dropping to the ground in order to explain gravity, rather than giving them the whole theoretical shepping, you know. I convinced a flat earther, temporarily, by asking him if it was possible for a sphere to be so large that you could not tell there was a sphere by simply being on the surface of it. It took him a while. I used an analogy of an extremely long line that was so slightly curved you could not tell so by looking at a small section of it. Eventually he said yes to the sphere, and I told him that was how big the Earth is. A few days later he reverted. Most of these people aren't mentally stable. They believe in a lot of conspiracies. Look, it's really easy. If the Earth is flat, there would be an edge, and there would be a fucking Disney park at the edge, and we could bungee jump off the side and paraglide into the void, etc., etc. Someone would be making an absolute shit ton of money off of it, if it existed. Guess what? Nobody is doing that. And in this world where absolutely everything is exploited for profit, if no one is making money off of it, it does not exist. No edge, not flat. Yet a clue. I watched a documentary about flat earthers called Truth Behind the Curve, and my analysis from watching that these flat earthers are a group of people who found a community to be a part of. It's a shame their community is based on a lie. But I saw a bunch of people who were to be part of a community. Most of the people were social awkward and whatnot, and saw an opportunity to be an influential figure within the community, so they doubled down on their flawed logic. The more against you are of them, the harder they wrap their flatness. TDR, I see flat earthers as a group of lonely people looking for a community that will accept them. I was debating a flat earther in Mexico, and I asked him about how GPS worked if there were no satellites. He said that they had devices in the ground to route you. I told him the Mexican government is barely able to put decent water pipes in the ground. Would he really think they had the tech to put routing devices in the ground? He chuckled with a 1,000-mile gaze. A serious answer here. The thing that made me stop was just the question, why would NASA lie to you? I will try replying to all of y'all, but we'll go to a study hall, so I'll reply later. The inclined seat conformed perfectly to his body, strategically placed in the cockpit so he could reach no buttons with outstretched arms. The straps anchored him firmly in place. They were uncomfortable but necessary. The engine burst to life with a roar that burned out all the other audio. The vibrations tore through his body, and he felt his body sink back into the seat as the G-force began to take hold. The captain was watching the readouts on the LAD displays and monitoring their trajectory as the acceleration began to peel his thoughts away. There was no more room in his brain. It had been filled by pure fear. The boosters grew with greater ferocity as they lifted higher into the sky, the sun beaming down on the left side of the shuttle. But faster they went, through max Q and higher into the stratosphere until the engines grew quieter, the air more silent, and the vibrations became less violent. They were approaching space, the final frontier. An hour later, and with the path of the shuttle a success, he noticed as his raw emotions withdrew that his body felt funny, and hair drifted aimlessly across his eyes as the captain's pan hovered in mid-air, and he knew the impossible was true. His childhood dream. He was in space, weightless. The captain turned around to him and motioned him to unhook his seatbelts. He did as he was commanded. They both left their chairs and glided over to the tiny glass windows to overlook the magnificence of Earth. "What do you think now?" said the captain. He recoiled in horror. It couldn't be. NASA had replaced the windows with high-definition screens in order to perpetrate their lies that the world was spherical. Those bastards. Not a flat earther, but I was a 9/11 truther, I guess you could say, insofar as I thought it was an inside job. I was heavily influenced and believed in multiple conspiracies in that zeitgeist film as well. There was a never-ending source of dark, shadowy days and thems controlling everything behind the scenes. I think there were a few factors that helped me escape that. Losing my father. It was such a life-changing event at that age that it made me reconsider everything in my life. some light training and evaluating information. I learned about how to vet sources, primary, whether something was actually news or just an opinion editorial, etc. Ironically, this education came before I was duped. After my dad died, suddenly this started to kick in more. Lack of time means to dig myself a deeper hole. I started college shortly after my father passed, and that a full-time job took up all my time. I had none to buy further into the newest crazy bullshit. I had no Facebook, Twitter, IG, etc. No smartphone or texting. My primary use of Reddit once I discovered it was for our Naruto, our Bleach, Rage comics, and advice animals. So all in all, I think the time away gave me time to detox. If I had been on social media as I discovered those things, I can only imagine I very well may have become a Q believer as well. Looking back, I see how gullible I was in that moment, fooled by the onslaught of half-truths and clever logic of the various theories. I know better now, and I should have known better then, but I've been humbled to the fact that everyone is vulnerable to this sort of stuff. To think otherwise is deluding yourself. Not me, but got a flat earther to question his beliefs, and hopefully critically analyze them. By giving him the proof he asked for, to which he responded mainstream science and media are lies. I asked why he asked for proof if he could just disregard it as lies either way, then told him that since he required no proof or evidence against to believe something, it made him the easiest person to deceive, and that it seemed pretty sheep-like to me. He deleted all of his flat earth comments and hasn't posted about it since. Did any of you former flat earthers just believe because you wanted to be unique and different from everyone else? I suspect that some people who deny shit like this are the same people who just wants to be different. They'll say they disliked a movie because the majority likes it. They'll say they don't enjoy a type of food cause most do. Basically, they don't really care how they truly feel about something. They just want to be different and say the opposite of the majority. Maybe not with everything, but they'll choose a few things in life because they want to feel special. I once had a conversation with a professional UFC fighter and outspoken flat earther. I tried to explain how Archimedes was able to prove the Earth was round just by using his shadow. I mentioned air travel and how Hawaii and Japan are not 20 hours of flying apart. But what I think got through to him the most was seasons. This particular guy was Brazilian. I explained that because the Earth is round, it's possible to be winter in Brazil and summer in the USA, and vice versa. He nodded and stared off into the distance silently, and the conversation was over. I don't think I converted him, but it gave him significant pause at the very least. It took about 5 years. It was a lot of willful ignorance on my part. I just refused to question the logic of it. In fact, I spent most of my time coming up with crazy fantasies about a lot of things I didn't understand. But you have to understand that there is just so much we don't know about that sometimes our priority on what is real and what can be believed can get confused. I was learning so much so fast that I really didn't question something so inane as the world being flat. Of course it was. Why wouldn't it be? The day that changed it forever, though, was when I asked my father what happens when you get to the edge of the world. He of course said the world is round like a ball. Being about 5 years old, I thought that made a lot of sense. Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Good luck.